The alley behind Simmons Street laundromat smelled really bad, like old trash and something else. Something warmer. Deja didn't place it right away. She was too tired. It was 2:46 in the morning, February in Omaha, and her second shift had just ended. The diner closed at 2. She'd stayed late to mop, because the $20 mop bonus was the difference between the light bill getting paid and the light bill getting paid late. Deja Simmons knew every version of that math. She walked fast, not because she was afraid of the dark. She'd grown up in North Omaha. She knew which corners to respect and which ones to walk through without making eye contact. She was moving fast because it was 11 degrees, and her coat had a broken zipper, and the wind off the Missouri River had spent all winter perfecting the art of finding the gaps in things. She almost missed him. He was tucked behind the dumpster on the east wall of the laundromat. Just a shape at first, small, crouched, motionless in a way that wasn't normal. Children don't hold still like that. Children fidget. They breathe loud and shift and announce themselves. This boy was barely making a sound, just his breath, short white puffs in the frozen air, and underneath that, something else. A low, strained whimper, not from the boy, from the dog. Deja stopped walking. She turned. She looked at the shape again. A boy, maybe 8, maybe 9. Dark hair, cut close on the sides and longer on top, pressed flat against his skull from the cold. He was wearing a school jacket, the kind with the embroidered logo on the chest. Private school probably, too thin for February. Completely wrong for this alley. Completely wrong for 2:46 in the morning. He had both arms around a dog. A medium-sized dog, cream-colored with pointed ears, shivering against his chest. The boy's face was angled down and away, but even from 6 feet Deja could see it. The left side of his jaw, swollen and dark. She stood there for 3 seconds. She counted them, because part of her brain, the part that had been 32 years old and a single mother for 4 of them, was telling her very clearly, Deja, don't. You have a daughter asleep 2 blocks from here. You have no weapon, no phone with more than 11% battery, and no idea what this boy's situation is or who put him there or whether the person who put him there is still close. Don't. Her feet moved anyway. There are people who slow down in the dark when something feels wrong, and people who don't. If you're still here, you already know which kind you are. She took 2 steps, stopped, crouched down so she wasn't standing over him. The boy flinched, his arms tightened around the dog. He didn't run. Running took energy he didn't have. Hey, she said. She kept her voice low, matter of fact. The same voice she used with Stella when there was a wasp in the kitchen and she needed her daughter to stop moving without scaring her worse. I'm not going to hurt you. I work at the diner up on 24th. I'm just walking home. The boy said nothing. That's a Jindo, Deja said. She had no idea if it was a Jindo. She said it because she needed something to say, something that wasn't about him or his face or the dark stain soaking through the sleeve of his jacket. The dog's ears moved at the word, 1 ear up, 1 half down. The boy looked up. His eyes were brown, almost black in the dark, and they were doing the thing that eyes do when a person has already decided they're not going to cry, and they're working very hard to honor that decision. He looked at her for a long moment, then he looked back down. Her name is Bomi, he said, quiet, precise. Korean accent underneath his English, but his English was clean and careful, the way it gets when a child has been taught to be understood. That's a good name, Deja said. Is she hurt? No, a pause. She's scared. Deja's eyes moved to his sleeve. The dark patch was spreading, slow but spreading. She'd seen enough spilled things in a diner to know what moved like that and what didn't. What about you? He didn't answer, which was its own answer. Okay, Deja said. She didn't make a speech. She didn't ask more questions. She stood up. Can you walk? He looked at her again, measuring her the way a person measures a bridge before they trust it with their weight. He was 9 years old maybe, and he was doing it with the eyes of someone who had seen a bridge fail before. Yes, he said. Then let's go. My apartment is 2 blocks away. You can sit somewhere warm. She started walking. She didn't look back to see if he followed. She counted on something she couldn't have named, some instinct that said, this child has been running from people. The worst thing you can do is look like you're trying to catch him. His footsteps came behind her after 4 seconds. The dog's nails ticked against the frozen pavement. Deja exhaled slowly, the steam of it dissolving into the dark. She had made the decision. Now she had to figure out everything else. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building that had good bones and bad heating. The radiator clicked and groaned all night, working hard, delivering warmth in irregular bursts the way tips came in at the diner, enough to survive, not enough to be comfortable. She unlocked the door quietly. Stella was asleep in the bedroom. Deja could hear her from the hallway, the soft, even breathing of a child who had not yet learned that the world contains nights like this one. She let the boy in first. He stood in the middle of her living room and looked around the way people do when they're cataloging exits. She noticed that. She filed it. Bomi sat at his feet and didn't move, her eyes moving back and forth between the boy and Deja with an alertness that felt more like a guard dog than a pet. Sit, Deja said. She pointed to the couch. She went to the kitchen, ran warm water over a clean dish towel, brought it back. She kept the overhead light off. Just the lamp by the window, on its lowest setting. Bright enough to work, not bright enough to wake Stella through the gap under the bedroom door. The boy sat. He held his arm slightly away from his body. She could see the jacket sleeve clearly now, a cut, long, running from the inside of his forearm almost to his elbow. Not deep enough to need a hospital, she thought, but she was going to be sure about that before she committed to anything. Can I look at your arm? She asked. He nodded, just once. She pushed the sleeve up carefully. The cut was about 4 inches long, already slowing on its own, the edges clean, not jagged. Whatever made it had been sharp. She cleaned it with peroxide she kept in the bathroom cabinet, the good kind, not the expired kind. He made a sound when it hit the cut. Just a sound. Short. He contained the rest of it. She taped the wound with butterfly closures from the first aid kit she'd bought 7 years ago, when Stella had gone through a phase of climbing everything. She wrapped it with a strip of gauze. While she worked, she noticed 2 things and said nothing about either of them. First, his school jacket had an embroidered crest. She recognized the shape of it. Westbrook Preparatory Academy, a private school on the west side of Omaha. Yearly tuition was more than Deja's annual income. She knew because she'd once looked it up, the way you look something up when you want to understand exactly how wide the distance is between you and someone else's life. Second, his left palm had a scar. Old, very thin, very precise. A small curved line, almost like a parenthesis. Not accidental, the kind of mark that requires intention. She taped the last edge of the bandage down and sat back. "What's your name?" she asked. "Jin," he said. She waited to see if more was coming. It wasn't. "Jin," she said. "Who did this?" "Nothing." "Okay." She stood up. "Are you hungry?" He nodded. This time the nod came faster. That was real. Hunger didn't have the same defenses as names. She made him a bowl of rice and leftover braised chicken from the batch she'd made Sunday. She warmed it on the stove, not the microwave, because the microwave sounded like a helicopter at 2 a.m. She put the bowl on the coffee table in front of him. She put a smaller bowl of water on the floor for Bomi. Bomi looked at it, looked at Jin. Jin gave some small, invisible signal. The dog drank. Jin ate. He was careful about it. not fast, not desperate, even though he had to be starving. He ate in controlled bites, watching the steam from the bowl as if it might tell him something. Deja sat in the armchair across from him. She did not look at him steadily. She looked at the wall, the window, her own hands. She gave him the quiet because the quiet was what he needed. After a few minutes he said, "My father is going to come for me." She looked at him then. "Your father knows you're here." "No," a pause. He was choosing words with the care of someone who had been taught that words cost things. "But he'll find me. He always finds things." Deja looked at the dog's collar. She'd noticed it when she first cleaned the wound. The collar itself was simple, dark nylon, unremarkable, but the tag was wrong. She'd spent years carrying trays, and the unconscious habit of that life was that she noticed weight. She noticed when something's heavier than it should be. The tag was a thick metal rectangle, engraved on one side with the name Bomi, and on the other side with a phone number she hadn't called, but it was too thick, too solid, not the cheap stamped metal of a pet store tag. She looked at the boy, she looked at the collar, she didn't say anything yet. "What did you say your last name was?" she asked. He met her eyes. "I didn't," he said, 9 years old, and already that precise about the difference between what was asked and what was said. "Fair enough," said Deja Simmons, and she let him finish eating. She did not call the police. She thought about it seriously, the way you think about the things you've been taught to do in a situation, and she walked through it step by step. A child apparently hurt, found alone at 2:46 in the morning. The protocol was clear. Call 911, file a report. Let the system do what the system is supposed to do. And then she thought about what happened when the system came to North Omaha at 2:46 in the morning. She thought about Donald Ribbs, 17 years old, found on a porch 3 blocks over, and what the report said afterward, and what his mother said about the report. She thought about the way institutions moved in neighborhoods like hers, the weight of them, the slowness, the things that fell through. She thought about the boy on her couch with a scar on his palm that was too precise to be an accident, and a dog with a tag that was too heavy to be just a tag, and an answer about his father that contained more certainty than any frightened child should have at 2:46 in the morning. She didn't call. Some decisions don't get applause. They just get done, quietly, in the middle of the night, by people who understand that the right thing and the official thing are not always the same. The people who understand that tend to find each other, eventually. She got him a pillow and a blanket and told him he could sleep on the couch. Bomi curled up at his feet before he was even settled, her cream-colored head resting on his ankle, her ears still slightly raised, still listening. Deja went to her bedroom. She did not sleep. She lay on her back and looked at the ceiling and thought about tomorrow, which was already today, which meant she had to be up in 4 hours to get Stella ready for school. And she had the lunch shift at the diner starting at 11. And somewhere in that sequence, there was a 9-year-old boy on her couch whose father, whoever he was going to come find him. She thought about the tag. She thought, a tracking device looks like a dog tag when you want it to. She thought, if someone is tracking the dog, they'll find this address. She thought, good, because that means someone is looking for this child, and this child deserves to be found. Then she thought, but what kind of someone? And it was that question, sitting on her chest like a fist, that kept her awake until the radiator finally managed to push enough warmth through the room that her body gave out and she slept. She woke at 4:50. Not because of an alarm, because of a sound, soft, barely there, coming through the bedroom door. She was up before she was fully conscious. 4 years of single motherhood does that to you. It rewires the thing that wakes you. It makes you sensitive to the sounds children make when something is wrong. even children who are not your own, even children you found in an alley a few hours ago. She opened the bedroom door. Jin was sitting up on the couch. He had the blanket around his shoulders. He was looking straight ahead at nothing. His lips were moving, barely. She could not hear the words from across the room, but the rhythm of them was the rhythm of something repeated, something memorized. She stepped closer. She caught 2 syllables, then 3, Korean. She hadn't spoken it in years. She'd taken 2 semesters at the community college downtown, back when she'd had a plan that included going full-time and finishing a degree, back before Stella's father left, and the plan compressed into something smaller and more immediate. She remembered fragments, words more than sentences, sounds more than meaning, but she caught one word. She was sure of it. Appa, father. He was calling for his father in his sleep. Sitting up, eyes open, lips moving, calling in Korean for a man he believed was coming. Deja stood very still. She did not step closer. She did not speak. She stood there for a long moment, watching this child she did not know, and something in her chest moved in a way she was not ready to examine. She went back to bed. She lay down. She did not sleep again. Stella woke at 6:15. This was not negotiable. She had inherited Deja's sense of time, which was not a clock sense but a justice sense. The day was going to happen, and she intended to be prepared for it. She came out of the bedroom in her nightgown, and her eyes went immediately to the couch, to the boy, to the dog. Stella Simmons was 8 years old, and she had opinions. About most things. The speed of those opinions, and the accuracy of them, had stopped surprising Deja somewhere around Amara's 6th birthday. She watched her daughter register the boy, the dog, the bandage visible on the boy's forearm, and the particular way he was sitting, upright and careful on the edge of the couch, holding the dog's collar loosely, ready to move. Stella looked at her mother. Deja said quietly, "This is Jin. He's going to stay with us for a little while, and that's Bomi." Stella looked at the dog. Her whole face changed, not because of Jin, because of the dog. "Can I pet her?" she asked Jin directly. Jin looked at Stella. Something shifted in his posture. She was 8 years old, and she had not looked at him with pity or fear or the particular careful handling that adults used. She'd gone straight to the dog. He understood that instinctively on a level he couldn't have explained. "Ask her," he said, "not me." Stella crouched down in front of Bomi and put her hand out, palm up, the way she'd seen people do in the videos she watched about dogs on Deja's phone. Bomi sniffed it. Her tail moved, once, twice. Stella smiled so wide it reached her ears. Deja went to make breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast because it was there. She listened from the kitchen. Through the small pass-through window over the counter, she could see the living room in slices. She watched Stella talking at Jin with the particular momentum of a child who has found a new subject. She watched Jin answer in short, careful sentences that gradually became slightly longer sentences. She watched Bomi put her head in Stella's lap, and Stella go still with wonder. She made the eggs. She thought about the tag. She thought about the word Appa in the dark. She thought about the scar on his palm. She put the plates on the table and called them in. Jin sat down. He looked at the plate. He looked at Deja. "Thank you," he said, quiet, precise, the same way he said everything. "Eat," she said. "Then you're going to tell me enough for me to keep you safe. That's the deal." He considered this. Then he picked up his fork. He didn't tell her everything. She knew that. She had learned in 4 years of raising a child alone to tell the difference between the whole truth and the piece of it that someone was choosing to share. Jin gave her enough. It came out in the sequence of someone who has rehearsed what they will and won't say, organized refusal, intentional gaps. His name was Jin Woo. He was 9. He went to Westbrook. He had been with men he did not name in a place he described only as a building near the river. And something happened. He wouldn't say what exactly, and he had run, and Bomi had been with him. Bomi had been in a pen near where they were keeping him, and he had gotten the latch open. And they had run through 2 alleys and a parking lot, and then he had lost too much blood from the arm to keep going at that speed, and he'd found the space behind the dumpster. "Why did you stop?" Deja asked. "You could have kept going." Jin looked at her across the kitchen table. "Bomi," he said, as if this were obvious. "She was limping. I wasn't going to leave her." Deja looked at the dog. Bomi was lying near the front door now, her front right paw stretched forward. Deja hadn't noticed the slight unevenness in her gait when she'd come in. She noticed it now. She thought, this child, 9 years old, wounded, being hunted by someone, bleeding through his sleeve, stopped running because his dog was limping. She thought, what kind of man raises a child like this? She thought, what kind of man also has a child taken from him as leverage? Both of those things couldn't be ordinary. "Jin," she said, "your father, what does he do?" The briefest pause, the weight of something being measured. "He handles things," Jin said, and he looked down at his plate. That was when Deja knew. Not the specifics, not the name or the empire, or the numbers, but the shape of it. She'd grown up near enough to the edges of that world to recognize the shape of it when someone described it in the careful vocabulary of a child who loved his father and had been taught never to say too much. She sat with that knowledge for a moment. The way you sit with a thing you cannot put back once you've picked it up. Then she said, "Finish your eggs." And he did. 8 blocks away, in a building on Leavenworth Street whose ground floor was a legitimate import logistics company and whose 3rd floor was something else entirely. A phone rang at 5:47 in the morning. No one answered it on the first ring. Not because anyone was asleep. Because in the organization of Choi Sung-min, you did not answer a ringing phone as if you were surprised by it. You let it ring twice. You composed yourself. You answered on the 3rd ring, already prepared for whatever it contained. The man who answered was not Sung-min. He was Kim Jae-won, 31, 1st Lieutenant, the person in this organization whose job it was to manage the space between what Sung-min knew and what Sung-min needed to know. He listened for 4 seconds. Then he set the phone down. Then he stood up from his chair and walked to the door of the inner office and knocked twice. He waited. "Come." Sung-min's voice was the same at 5:47 in the morning as it was at noon. Level, uninflected, the kind of calm that didn't belong to relaxation. It belonged to a man who had trained himself, over a very long time, to remove the audible evidence of anything. Kim entered. The office was spare, 1 desk, 1 lamp, a single window with the blinds drawn. Sung-min sat behind the desk. He was not sleeping. He had been awake, working since 3. He was always awake at 3. There was a theory among his men that he did not sleep. Kim knew the truth. He slept in fragments, 2 hours here, 90 minutes there, always in a chair. Never in a bed, because beds were for people who could afford to be unconscious for 8 consecutive hours, and Sung-min had not been that person since he was 24 years old. He was 41 now. He looked at Kim. He waited. Kim said 4 words. "Jin Woo is not home." Something happened to the air in the room, not to Sungmin's face. His face didn't change, but the air changed, the way the air changes in a room just before a storm finds the building. "Since when?" Sungmin said, not a question, a demand delivered in the syntax of a question. Mrs. Han went to wake him at 5:30. His room was empty. Bomi is also gone. Sungmin sat still for 4 seconds, then he stood up from behind the desk. He buttoned the top button of his shirt, which he always did when he was moving from one mode to another. It was a small thing. It was one of 2 physical tells he had. Kim had catalogued them both and told no one. "Pull the GPS," Sungmin said. Kim's throat tightened. "The signal is reading offline." The faintest pause. "Bomi's collar." "We're trying. The tracker registered a location near the South 13th Street Industrial Corridor at 11:40 last night. After that, nothing. The signal went dead." Sungmin looked at him. "Went dead," he said, "or was blocked. We don't know yet." Another pause, this one longer. Sungmin's eyes moved to the window. The blinds were down. He looked at them anyway. How many men on the situation? 6, on rotation, but none of them were assigned to cover. "How many men on my son?" Kim had served Sungmin for 6 years. He had never heard that particular arrangement of words come out of his boss's mouth. "My son," not as a possession, as a vulnerability, as the one thing in the entire organizational structure that did not have a contingency. 2, Kim said. "Standard household security. Both were found in the kitchen, sedated. Professional job. Someone got in and got out without triggering a single alarm." The temperature in the room dropped by something that had nothing to do with the thermostat. Sungmin walked to the window. He stood with his back to Kim. His voice, when it came, was very quiet. It was always very quiet when it was most serious. "Find him," he said. "Every resource, every contact, every building in this city that Rhee has ever put a hand on. I want someone standing in front of it within the next 30 minutes. And get my car. Boss. Now J1. Kim left. He did not run in the hallway. Running communicated panic. But he walked faster than he had ever walked in that building, and the men he passed understood from the speed of him exactly what the next few hours were going to be. Behind the closed door of the inner office, Sungmin stood at the window with his hand flat against the glass. The glass was cold. February. Omaha. His son was somewhere in this city, in the dark. He stood there for 11 seconds. He counted them. Then he picked up his phone and made the first of 9 calls. By 8 in the morning, Jin's fever had started. Deja noticed it when she was clearing the breakfast plates. She put her hand on his forehead out of habit, the same reflex that governed every interaction she had with anyone under 4 feet tall, and she felt it immediately. Not bad yet. A low-grade push of heat, the kind a body produces when it's fighting something. The cut on his arm was clean. She'd done a good job with the butterfly closures, but he'd been outside in 11 degrees for God knew how long before she found him, and the human body doesn't forgive that kind of exposure without negotiating. She got the children's acetaminophen from the medicine cabinet. She gave him 2 tablets and a full glass of water and stood there while he drank it. He drank the whole glass. She refilled it. He drank half of that. Stella was watching from the doorway of her bedroom with the particular gravity of a child who had absorbed, through 8 years of proximity to her mother, when something required seriousness. "Is he sick?" she asked. "A little," Deja said. "He's going to be fine." She said it with the voice she used when it was probably true, not the voice she used when it was definitely true. Stella heard the difference. She always did. She looked at Jin. "Do you want to see my books?" she asked him. "I have the whole Rick Riordan series, all of them. My mama got them at the library sale." Jin looked at her. His eyes were slightly glassy now, the fever settling in. "The Percy Jackson ones." Stella's face lit up with the recognition of a person who has found their exact frequency in someone else. Yes, and the Kane Chronicles, and Magnus Chase. I have those too, Jin said, at my house. A pause. Something moved across his face, there and gone. At home. Stella said nothing for a moment. Then she went and got the lightning thief and brought it to the couch and sat on the other end with it open between them and started reading aloud from the beginning, without asking if he wanted her to. Deja stood in the kitchen doorway and watched. Bomi had moved from the front door to the couch. She was between the two children now, her head resting on Jin's knee, her eyes closed, her breathing slow. The bad-tempered, alert creature that had come through the door at 3 a.m. had shifted into something else. This was a dog at rest, a dog that had decided, somewhere in the last few hours, that this was a safe place. Deja thought, smart dog. Deja thought, I hope she's right. She went to the kitchen, she looked at her phone. 10% battery. She plugged it in. She opened the search bar. She typed, Westbrook Preparatory Academy Enrollment Korean Family Omaha. She stared at it. She deleted it. She was not going to do this. She was not going to chase information on a child who had given her his first name and not his last for a reason. She typed instead, tracking device dog collar thick metal tag. She read 3 results. She closed the browser. Then she went and looked at Bomi's collar. She unclipped it carefully, gently, while the dog was half asleep and Jin was focused on Stella's reading. She turned the tag over in her hand, thick, solid, heavier than its size. On the back, below the phone number, there was a very small indentation, circular, like a reset button or an activation port. She put the collar back on Bomi. She went back to the kitchen. She put both hands on the counter. She looked out the window at the street below. At North Omaha in February, the bare trees and the brown grass and the 2 teenagers walking to the bus stop, with their hoods up and their breath fogging in the air. Someone was going to come to this address. She had known that since she carried the dog's collar weight in her hands. The only questions were who and how fast, and whether they were the people Jin was running from or the people who were looking for him. Those were not the same group. She was sure of that now, and she needed to figure out which one was going to knock on her door first. The knock came at 9:14 in the morning, not the front door of the apartment. The building's outer door, 3 floors down. The buzzer. Deja looked at Jin. He had heard it too. He was already sitting up from the couch where he'd half dozed with Stella and her book. His eyes were sharp despite the fever. He put one hand on Bomi's back. Don't open it, he said. I wasn't going to without knowing who it is, Deja said. She went to the intercom panel by the front door. She pressed the button. Who is it? A man's voice, low, controlled. An accent she recognized, sharper than Jin's, less softened by American school years. We're looking for a lost dog, he said. Cream-colored medium size. Have you seen it? Deja's hand rested on the intercom button. She thought about the tag. She thought about 9-year-old eyes full of the specific weight of a child who did not want to go back to wherever he had come from. She pressed the button again. No dogs here, she said. Building doesn't allow pets. Silence on the other end. She was lying, and she knew they knew she was lying, because if the caller had a tracker, they'd seen a signal in this building, or near it. They were testing her. She had told them something verifiable as false, which meant the next move was theirs. She stepped back from the intercom. She turned to Jin. He was standing now. He had his shoes on already. She hadn't seen him put them on. He had one hand on Bomi's collar, not gripping it, resting. She noticed that his knuckles were white. Back door, Deja said. He looked at her. They'll have the back too. She thought about that. 3rd floor, 2 stairwells, 1 building entrance. fire escape off the kitchen window. "Is your father's number in her tag?" she asked. A pause that answered the question. "Call it," she said. Jin looked at her for a long moment. The fever was in his eyes, making them brighter and less focused at the same time. He was 9 years old. He was in a stranger's apartment in North Omaha at 9:12 in the morning with men downstairs who were not his father's men. "My father," he said carefully, "is dangerous." "I know," said Deja. "You're not scared." She looked at him. "Jin Woo," she said. "I raised Stella by myself in this city on a diner salary. I have been scared every single day for 4 years. Being scared doesn't mean you stop. It means you pick the scariest option and make it yours before someone else can." Something moved in his face, young and old at the same time. He reached out his hand. She gave him her phone. He looked at the back of Bomi's tag. He dialed. It rang once. On the third ring she heard through the thin wall of the phone speaker a voice, level, very quiet. The voice of someone who had composed themselves before they picked up, who had been waiting for this call, who was not going to let the waiting show. Jin said 4 words in Korean, then stopped. Deja heard the change in the voice on the other end. She didn't need the language to understand it. She'd heard it before, in a different accent, in a different year. It was the sound a person makes when something they thought might be lost is suddenly, impossibly found. Jin held out the phone to her. His hand was shaking slightly, or maybe it was the fever. "He wants to talk to you," he said. Deja took the phone. She put it to her ear. The voice on the other end was very quiet, very controlled. She had the immediate and specific sensation of standing at the edge of something that had no bottom. "You have my son," said the voice. Not a question, not an accusation, just a fact being confirmed between 2 people who both already knew it. "He found me," Deja said. "I didn't find him." A pause. 1 second. 2. "Is he hurt?" "He has a cut on his arm. I closed it. He has a low-grade fever. He's been inside and warm since 3 this morning. He ate breakfast." She paused. "He's reading Percy Jackson." Nothing on the line for a long moment. Then, "There are men in your building." "I know. They buzzed. I told them I had no dogs." Another pause. "You lied to them." "Yes? Why?" Deja looked at Jin, who was looking back at her from the couch with Stella beside him and Bomi between them and the lightning thief open on the cushion. "Because," she said, "he has a fever and a cut, and he spent the night on my couch, and I'm not in the habit of handing children over to strangers who ring my buzzer asking about lost dogs at 9 in the morning." The silence on the other end of the line was the longest one yet. When the voice came back, it was very slightly different, not softer. Nothing about this voice was soft, but it had shifted, by degrees too small to measure. "Keep him there," Sungmin said. "Don't open the door, don't let him near the windows. I will be there in 23 minutes. The line went dead. Deja set the phone on the counter. She looked at the front door. She looked at the kitchen window. She looked at her daughter and the boy on the couch and the dog between them. She picked up the phone again and called the diner. She told them she wasn't coming in for the lunch shift. They were not happy about it. She said she understood. She said she was sorry. She hung up. $20. Gone. She'd figure out where it came from later. She went to the couch. She sat down on the armchair across from the children. She kept her voice even. "Your father is coming," she told Jin. Something happened to his face. Too many things at once. Relief and dread, love and fear, the kind of mixture that only happens when the person you need most is also the person whose life is the reason you're sitting in a stranger's apartment in North Omaha at 9 in the morning with a knife cut on your arm and a fever building in your blood. "Okay," he said. "Very small." Stella looked between them both. She closed the lightning thief. She put her hand on top of Jin's and left it there. She didn't say anything. She was 8 years old, and she understood that some moments required presence, not words. Deja watched her daughter and thought, "I did something right." Then she looked at the front door. 23 minutes. She thought about the man on the other end of that phone, the voice of him, level and terrible underneath those two things. Something she couldn't name yet. Something she would be thinking about for the rest of the day, and probably longer than that. She thought he said 23 minutes. She thought, not 20, not 25, 23. She thought a man who says 23 minutes means exactly 23 minutes. She looked at the window. Cold February light, bare branches, 2 teenagers at the bus stop, long gone now. Somewhere in this city, a black sedan was already moving through the streets with purpose. She looked at Jin. He had closed his eyes. The fever was pulling him down. Bomi pressed closer against his leg. She looked at her daughter's hand on top of his. 23 minutes. Deja Simmons sat very still in her armchair, in her apartment in North Omaha that smelled like scrambled eggs and old radiator heat, and something warmer underneath all of it, and she waited. The knock on the apartment door, when it finally came, was not loud. That was the first thing. It was not loud. It was precise, 3 times, evenly spaced, the knock of someone who did not need volume because they had never in their adult life needed to announce themselves twice. Deja stood up from the armchair. Jin's eyes had opened at the sound. He was already trying to stand. She put a hand up, flat, in his direction. Stay. He sat back. The fever had his eyes glassy and his face flushed, and he sat back because she had said stay, and because, she realized, this child had grown up around people whose signals meant something. She went to the door. She didn't open it. "Who is it?" she said. "Choi Sung-min." A pause that lasted exactly long enough to be deliberate. "You have my son." She unlocked the deadbolt. She unlocked the chain. She opened the door. The man at the door was not what she had built in her head in 23 minutes of waiting. She had built something larger than life, the way you do when a voice carries a certain weight. She had built something that announced itself. He was not that. He was tall, not imposing tall, just tall. He was wearing a black wool coat, no tie, the top button of his dress shirt open. His hair was very dark, cut short and precise. His face was the kind that had spent years working against itself, the kind where the sharpness of the features and the control of the expression created something that was very difficult to look at directly. Not because it was frightening exactly, but because it was too composed, too still. Like looking at the surface of water and not knowing how deep it went. He looked at her. He looked behind her, into the apartment. She stepped aside. He walked in. He walked past her without looking at her, straight to the couch, and Jin stood up, fever and all, and Sung-min crossed the room in 5 steps and crouched down in front of his son and put both hands on the sides of Jin's face and looked at him. He looked at him for a long moment. He said something in Korean, very low, and Jin answered in Korean, and Sung-min nodded once. Then he pulled Jin's arm out gently and looked at the bandage. He didn't look at Deja, but she saw him register it. The butterfly closures, the clean gauze, the care of it. He stood up. He said something else to Jin. Jin looked at Stella. He said something in Korean. Sung-min turned his head and looked at Stella for the first time. Stella looked back. She did not look frightened. She looked curious, the way she always looked when she encountered something she hadn't seen before, with the specific focused attention of a child who intended to understand it. "This is Stella," Jin said. She read to me. Sung-min's expression didn't change, but he said in English, clear and careful, "Thank you, Stella." Stella considered this. "You're welcome," she said. "He knows all the same books as me." Something happened in Sung-min's face then. It was small. It passed quickly. The particular expression of a parent who has been frightened and has not yet allowed themselves to stop being frightened. And something small and ordinary breaks through the fear for just a second. And the relief of it is almost physical. He looked at Deja. She looked back at him. The apartment was quiet. The radiator clicked. Bomi sat between the children with her ears up, watching Sung-min with the eyes of a dog who was deciding what she thought of him. A moment passed. Bomi's tail moved once. "Your dog," Deja said. "She has a tracker in her collar tag." "Yes," he said. "That's how you found us." "That's how I confirmed the address. I had the general area within 20 minutes of the first GPS failure." He paused. "The men who buzzed your intercom were Ree's, not mine." "I know," she said. "I figured." He looked at her for a long moment, not the way men usually looked at her, not with assessment or dismissal, or the particular evaluating quality that came with being a 32-year-old black woman in rooms that had decided before she arrived who she was. He looked at her the way she'd seen people look at something they couldn't categorize, like his system had produced no result. "You lied to them," he said. "You mentioned that, and then you called me anyway." "Your son called you," she said. "That was his decision. I just gave him the phone." He tilted his head very slightly. "You told him to call." "I told him to pick the scariest option and make it his before someone else could." Something shifted in the room. She couldn't have said what. The temperature was the same, the light was the same, but something in the air between them became different in the way air becomes different when two things that haven't been introduced to each other come close enough to notice the other's existence. Jin was watching both of them. She caught his eyes over Sung-min's shoulder. He looked tired and feverish, and, underneath those things, something she hadn't seen in him before. Watchful, expectant, the look of someone waiting to see which way something falls. Sung-min's men arrived 4 minutes later. She knew this because the hallway outside her door went from empty to occupied very quietly, and she heard footsteps that knew where to step to make no sound but made some anyway, because her hallway floor was old and had opinions about being walked on. 2 men came inside. They were young, late 20s, both in dark coats. They looked at everything in the apartment with the systematic attention of people who had been trained to look at spaces and read them for information. Then they looked at her. She looked back. Sung-min said something in Korean, a single short phrase, and both men stopped looking at her. He turned back to her. "I need to move Jin," he said. "I need to move him now. Ree's people know approximately where he is." "Then go," she said. He paused. "They may also know that someone helped him, provided shelter." She held his eyes. "Are you telling me I'm in danger?" "I'm telling you it's possible." He said it the way he said everything, directly, without buffering it. She found herself appreciating that more than she expected to. She looked at Stella. Stella had retreated to the kitchen doorway and was standing there with her arms crossed, watching everything with the particular stillness she got when she was absorbing and processing. She looked like a small scientist in a nightgown. Deja thought about the lunch shift she'd already given up. She thought about the $20. She thought about Ree's men at the buzzer and the weight of Bomi's tag in her hand in the morning, and Jin's lips moving in the dark, calling for his father, and her daughter's hand on top of his on the couch cushion. She thought, I am already inside this. That happened before the sun came up. The only question is whether I handle it standing still or moving. How long, she said. Sung-min looked at her. What? How long before you've neutralized whatever risk Ree's people present, to this address, to my daughter? A pause. He was looking at her with that expression again, the one that had no category in whatever system he used. 72 hours, he said. Probably less. Probably, she repeated. In my work, he said, I don't offer certainties. I appreciate the honesty, she said. We'll take probably. He looked at her for a long moment. Ms. Simmons, she said. Deja, he repeated it. Just the first name, quiet, careful, the way he said everything. Ms. Deja. He paused on that, seemed to decide against adjusting it. J1 will stay with you. Outside your door, you won't see him, but if anyone comes, he'll be there before they reach your door." She wanted to say she didn't need a bodyguard. She stopped because the rational part of her brain, the part that ran math and made decisions at 3 a.m, said, "You have Stella." "Okay," she said. Sung Min turned to Jin. Jin got up. He was steadier than he'd been an hour ago, the acetaminophen and the warmth doing their work. He put on his jacket. Bomi went to his side automatically. He looked at Stella. "I have to go," he said. Stella nodded. She disappeared into her bedroom. She came back 30 seconds later holding something, the lightning thief. She held it out to him. "You can borrow it," she said. "You already know the beginning. Start from chapter 5. That's where it gets really good." Jin looked at the book. He took it with both hands. He held it against his chest for a moment. "I'll give it back," he said. "I know," said Stella. "I have 2 copies. That one's mine. Don't lose it." He almost smiled. It was the first time in 12 hours she'd seen anything close to it on his face, and it changed his face entirely. It made him look like what he was. A 9-year-old boy. Just a boy. Sung Min was watching this exchange. Deja was watching Sung Min watch it. She saw the moment it landed on him, not on his face, in his posture, a fraction of a degree, the smallest softening, the armor doing something it had probably not done in a very long time. Then he looked at Deja. "I'll be in touch," he said. "About the 72 hours. She nodded. "I'll be here." He held her eyes for 1 more second. Then he turned and walked to the door. His men moved ahead of him. Jin followed. In the doorway, Jin turned 1 more time. He looked at her. "Thank you," he said, "for the eggs." She nodded. "And for not opening the door," he said. The door closed. She stood in the middle of her apartment, which was suddenly very quiet in the way of a place that had recently contained more life than it was designed for. The couch cushions still held the shape of where he'd sat. Bomi's water bowl was still on the floor. The lightning thief, 1 copy, was gone. Stella came and stood beside her. She slipped her hand into Deja's. "That was his dad," Stella said. "Yes. He was scared." Stella said this with certainty. "How could you tell?" Stella thought about it. "He kept looking at Jin's arm," she said, "like it was going to get more hurt while he was looking at it." Deja looked down at her daughter, 8 years old, small scientist in a nightgown. "Yeah," she said, "he was scared." She squeezed Stella's hand and went to start the dishes. The next 2 days were quiet, the quiet that sits on top of things. J1 was outside her door. She knew because on the first morning she opened it to get the neighbor's package from the hallway mat, and he was there, standing at the far end of the hall near the fire door, hands in his coat pockets, looking nowhere in particular. He looked at her. She held up the package. He nodded. She went back inside. She went to her shifts. Stella went to school. Life continued in the shape it had always had, the shape of early mornings and packed lunches and the mathematics of 11% battery and a $20 gap. But there were 2 differences. The first, every time she came home, the hallway had been assessed before she got there. She understood this because the neighbor's mat was always slightly repositioned, meaning someone with very specific habits had looked at it and put it back not quite exactly. The second, Jin called from a number she didn't have in her contacts at 7:30 the first evening. He asked Stella what happened in chapter 5. She could hear him eating something. She could hear in the background voices and a television and the sounds of a household, the sounds of a place that was alive and populated and warm. She did not listen carefully. She handed the phone to Stella and let them talk for 20 minutes about the plot of The Lightning Thief, then went to fold laundry. She thought about Sung Min twice in that first day. Both times she stopped herself before the thought went anywhere specific. She picked up a thing to do instead. Both times, the thing she picked up was heavy and required both hands. The 72 hours closed on a Thursday morning. She knew because her phone rang at 6:47 a.m. before Stella was up, and the number was not Jin's. She answered. "Simmons. It's handled," sung Min's voice. "The same as on the phone 3 days ago. Level, controlled. And underneath those things, the same something she still didn't have a name for. Ree's operation is finished. The people who know your address are no longer a concern." She sat on the edge of her bed. The early February light was just starting through the curtains. All of them. All of the relevant ones. A pause. "You're safe. Stella is safe." She noticed he'd used Stella's name. She filed that. "Thank you," she said. "I have to tell you something," Sung Min said. She waited. "Jin told me what you said to him when I called, about picking the scariest option and making it yours before someone else can." She said nothing. "He's been saying it to himself," Sung Min said. "In the car, when he thinks no one can hear him." She closed her eyes for a moment. She opened them. "He's a good kid," she said. "He is." A pause that had texture to it. Because of his mother mostly, she died when he was 5. She was the one who taught him to care about the dog, about staying with something when it was hurt, even when it cost him. The apartment was very quiet. She could hear the radiator. She could hear Stella turning over in the next room. She could hear, through the thin walls of the building, someone on the second floor making coffee. "I'm sorry," she said, and meant it. He needed someone, Sung Min said carefully, who treated him like he was a child first, not an asset, not a target, just a child. Another pause, the longest one yet. "I don't encounter that often in the world I'm in." She thought about the scar on Jin's palm. She thought about the Westbrook preparatory jacket. She thought about the dog's collar and the tracker inside it, the weight of it in her hand in the morning, and all the things that weight represented. She thought this man built a life designed to protect his son from everything, including the life itself. She said, "What's the scar on his left palm?" Silence on the line. "There's a mark," she said, "a small curved line. Old scar, it's not an accident. Dent." More silence. "In my family," Sung Min said finally, very quiet, "it's how we claim our children, so that if they're ever found somewhere without their name, someone who knows what to look for can bring them home." A pause. "His mother was the one who insisted on it. She said she didn't want him to ever be unclaimed." Deja sat very still on the edge of her bed in the early morning gray light. She thought about a woman she would never meet who had loved a boy enough to mark him, so that the world would always know he was wanted. She thought, this is what they share. He had a woman who chose love over fear, and that woman is gone, and the shape of her is everywhere in how he moves. She didn't say any of this. "Tell Jin Chapter 7 is where Annabeth shows you who she really is," she said instead. "Tell him Stella said that." A pause. Then very quietly, "Okay." She heard something in that word that she hadn't heard before in his voice, something that had no armor on it. The line sat open between them for another few seconds. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them hung up. Then he said, "I'd like to repay you." "You don't owe me anything," she said. "I know," he said. "I'd still like to." She thought about the $20. She thought about the lunch shift. She thought about Stella's winter coat, which was one more season from being too small and not enough season from being replaceable. She thought about all the practical things. She said, "Bomy's paw." She was limping when Jin brought her in, front right. Silence. "She needs a vet," Deja said. Jin ran with her for 2 alleys in a parking lot, and she didn't stop because he needed her to keep going. She probably has a stress fracture or a sprain. She's been favoring it. She paused. He doesn't know because he was focused on getting somewhere safe, but he'll notice eventually and it'll wreck him. The silence stretched. "Get her checked," Deja said. "That's all I want." When Sungmin spoke again, his voice had shifted, not softer, not warmer. But something in it was different in a way she couldn't measure. Something had been removed, some layer of distance, some carefully maintained gap. "We'll get her checked today," he said. "Good," she said. "Miss Deja." She waited. "When Jin calls Stella," he said, "don't discourage it." She thought about that. "I wasn't planning to." Another pause, short. "No," he said quietly. "I didn't think you were." He ended the call. She sat on the edge of her bed with the phone in her hand and looked at the curtains and the February light coming through them. From the next room, Stella's alarm went off. 7 o'clock. Stella reached over and turned it off the way she always did, in one efficient motion, without complaint. Deja put the phone in her pocket. She stood up. She went to start breakfast. Eggs. She was cracking the second egg when she realized she was already looking forward to the next time the phone rang. She stood at the stove and looked at that thought from a distance, the way you look at a thing that has arrived in your life without an invitation and shown no sign of leaving. She thought, this is an impossible thing. She thought, I know what impossible feels like. I also know what it looks like when something impossible is worth the weight of it. She cracked the third egg. The pan was hot and the butter was brown at the edges, and the apartment smelled like morning, like the specific morning that comes after the worst night, the kind that carries with it the evidence of having survived. She made breakfast. She called Stella. Outside the window, Omaha was waking up, a city that contained, somewhere inside its grid of streets and ordinary buildings, a man with a level voice and a son who borrowed books and a dog with a paw that needed looking after. She set the plates on the table. Stella came in, already dressed, already braided, already moving at full speed. She sat down, she looked at her plate, she looked at her mother. "Is everything okay?" she asked. Deja sat down across from her. She picked up her fork. "Getting there," she said. Stella considered that. She picked up her own fork. She took a bite. She chewed. She swallowed. "Mom," she said. Jin's dad." She looked at the table for a moment, choosing words with the particular seriousness she brought to the things that mattered. "He called him Appa. That's what Jin said when his dad came in. He said it really quiet, like he was saying a word that was bigger than the sound of it." Deja looked at her daughter. "Yeah," she said, "it is." Stella nodded. She went back to her eggs. Outside, the wind moved through the bare branches on the street. Somewhere in this city, a 9-year-old boy with a fever and a borrowed book and a scarred palm was getting dressed for a day that would look, from the outside, like an ordinary day. And somewhere on the 3rd floor of an import logistics building on Leavenworth Street, a man with a very quiet voice was sitting at his desk, not working, just sitting. His hand was flat on the desk in front of him, not doing anything, just there. Still. The same way it had been pressed against the cold glass of his window at 5:47 in the morning, when Kim Jae-won had walked through the door and said 4 words. He looked at his hand. He looked at his phone on the desk beside it. He did not pick up the phone. Not yet. He was still sitting with something he hadn't felt in a very long time and wasn't ready to name, something that had arrived in his life in the shape of a woman who found his son in an alley and made him scrambled eggs and told him to call the scariest option before someone else could. He was not a man who moved toward things without looking at them first from every angle, but he thought about her voice on the phone, even, clear. No performance in it, no calculation, just the specific kind of honesty that lived in people who had carried too much alone for too long to waste energy on anything that wasn't true. He thought about Stella's hand on Jin's on the couch cushion. He thought about Bomi's paw. He thought, she noticed the paw. He thought, I didn't. She noticed a limping dog belonging to someone else's child in the middle of the worst night of that child's life. and she held it as information, and she gave it to me as the only thing she wanted in return. His hand was still flat on the desk. He picked up the phone. He set it back down. He looked at the window. The blinds were drawn, cold and getting colder at night, but the days were starting to hold the light a little longer. He'd read that somewhere. February in Nebraska. The light starts to come back before the warmth does. He thought, I am not finished looking at this from every angle. He thought, but I'm not putting the phone down either. 3 days later, the doorbell rang. Not the building buzzer. The apartment door. 2 knocks, even. Spaced exactly right. Deja opened it. A man she recognized as J1 stood in the hallway. He was holding a box. The box had the logo of a veterinary clinic on the side. She knew the one. It was on Leavenworth, not a cheap one. He held out the box. She took it. Inside was a dog collar, dark nylon, medium size, and a note. 1 line, handwritten. Korean characters on one side, which she couldn't read, and on the other side, in English, in the careful hand of someone writing in their second language, Bomi's paw. Stress sprain, 6 weeks, then full strength. This collar has no tracker. It has only her name. She stood in the doorway and looked at the note. She flipped it over, looked at the Korean side. She could not read it. She looked at J1. What does it say on the other side? J1 looked at the note. He looked at her, a pause that had its own kind of weight. It says, a woman who sees the things no one else sees deserves to be seen in return. Deja stood in her doorway in North Omaha. She looked at the note for a long time. Then she said, tell him thank you. J1 nodded. He turned to go. And tell him, she said, that Stella is already on chapter 12. J1 paused. He turned back. For the first time since she'd first seen him in the hallway, something moved in his face. Something small, the beginning of a thing. He nodded once more. He walked away. She heard the fire door at the end of the hallway open and close. She looked down at the collar in her hand. Then she looked at the note. A woman who sees the things no one else sees deserves to be seen in return. She went inside. She closed the door. She sat down in the armchair. She held the note in both hands and sat with the weight of it. She thought, this is not the beginning of anything safe. She thought, but I stopped choosing safe the night I turned around in an alley and walked toward a shape in the dark that was too still to be right. She thought, some things find you before you find them. She folded the note. She put it in the pocket of her diner uniform jacket, the one hanging on the hook by the door. The jacket she wore every day. The pocket she put her pen and her order pad and her keys. She put it there, where she would reach for it without thinking, where her hand would find it in the ordinary run of the day. Then she sat very still in her armchair and thought about a man she barely knew who had, without explanation, replaced the tracker in his dog's collar with just the dog's name. Outside, Omaha moved through its February afternoon. Bare trees, long light, the specific cold that comes before the thaw, and somewhere in that city, a man's phone buzzed with a message from Kim J1. He read it. He read it again. Then he set the phone face down on his desk. He allowed himself one thing he almost never allowed. He smiled. Just briefly, just barely, just enough. The women who hold the line when no one is watching, who notice the limping dog and the borrowed book and the word that is bigger than the sound of it, they tend to find stories like this one, and stories like this one tend to find them. If that is you, you already